Hey everyone, welcome to the Human Cloud Podcast, the spot where leaders come to drive the future of work forward. So today we have Angela Alberty, co-founder of myBasePay, one of the leading EOR solutions, especially with LATAM talent. Now we got two main areas of focus that I really want you to listen into. The first is how in the world can procurement HR and contingent talent programs go from being a support function to strategic? Meaning, how can they really have a seat at the table to move the business forward? Second is I want you to listen to what we mean when we say LATAM talent and why it's more than just outsourcing. So a couple of things when we talk about going from supportive to strategic, the way Angela describes it is that there's an evolution from VMSs and MSPs, in what she'll call white space, to tech-first EORs and VORs. So I want you to really listen to that. Second, with LATAM, I want you to hear how she talks about it and the benefits. So we obviously know about the cost, but the bigger impact is it's a population that if you do good, they do good to you. But it requires much more than just a traditional outsourcing mindset. So strap in, enjoy, and most importantly, go drive some change. Ange, thank you for hopping on. For you listeners out there, make sure to watching the video. There has been some, I'm going to say less than ideal people walking by, and that's going to add to the fun if you got this on video. We know a couple of you listeners, you put this on the background, and that's totally fine. Just make sure you're looking a couple times because you're going to see some fun stuff, hopefully. But Ange, thank you for hopping on. Whereabouts are you sitting?
Well, Matt, thank you for having me. First of all, I let you know when I fangirled the first time I got the invite to be on this show. Admittingly, I started listening to the show in 2020, so it's awesome to be here. A very special project that you guys have going on. But I'm sitting in Houston, Texas. I'm in one of the co-working spaces that we often go to. Born and raised here in Houston, and our offices are headquartered out of Miami. So that's usually where I frequent, those two Gulf Coast, East Coast areas of the world.
Can you help us correctly say the word empanada? Because as someone who lives in Miami, I still stop my breath and think to myself, oh no, how do I say it right? So most importantly, you listeners, if you get nothing out of this, at least you're going to not look like an idiot if you're in Miami. How do you correctly
there
say
you go.
it?
And the way that you preface that, I was like, I thought it was going to be something like super critical and controversial. But if we're going to say it out there out loud, empanada.
Empanada. Oh, so it's like an I. It's like I-M-P.
The E's are pronounced like I's in Spanish. There's your little lingo for the day.
So perfect. Okay, listen, most guests, we wait until the end to say, hey, please tell us about the big wins. But you and myBasePay have been on a roll for about 3 months now. And so if you can please, do not be humble whatsoever. Can you please just rattle off all the incredible news about you? There was recently a Forbes article titled something like myBasePay keeps growing and growing, right? I thought you weren't going to be able to top the whole largest pre-seed round ever. You did. But so could you totally not be humble and just brag for about a minute of all the awesome stuff that's been happening?
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. But no, like you mentioned, we got our start in 2020, April of 2020, when the world was undergoing one of the largest global pandemics, and the whole entire sanctity of our general minds was just kind of upside down. We were able to get funding. It's a $60 million pre-seed round. We spent about 9 to 10 months in stealth mode building our platform. My background has been within this very defined area of employer of record for contract and contingent talent. And then from that point, we launched in 2021, the summer of 2021. And I want to start off by saying the road to success is never linear. So there's been lots of ups and downs and learning curves. learning opportunities on understanding what the ideal client is that we want to go after, and the nuances that are associated with just a compliant undertaking that we take on, and how do we leverage that in a way that's deployable and expandable to our client base. So really quickly off the bat, when we launched we wanted to be domestic for the most part, and really focusing on your higher waged earners. And that was like crumpled up piece of paper thrown in the trash from the moment that we got our start, because we quickly had to transition into different risk profiles, undergoing within healthcare, undergoing within LI. And then we started getting calls about supporting in different geographic regions of the world. So a lot of our investment structure has been allocated towards, general counsels and getting us stood up throughout Latin America and Canada. And we realized that we don't want to be the EOR that's everything to everyone, everywhere. So we garnered our footing into areas that we were naturally expanding in through our own internal contingent workforce. And a lot of that was in Latin America, Canada, EMEA, have really been the primary footings of when we launched. And that's been the story in a nutshell. It's been an exciting ride, but as anyone can tell you that has started a business, it's had its shares of ups and downs, and we're just happy and here for it to see where the next chapter is going to go for us.
If that doesn't get your attention, then you got something wrong with you. Your pulse obviously isn't pulsing. But so there's two directions that I think are going to be crucial with you and to our listeners. And the first direction is going to be how to be strategic about this. And the second direction is going to be how to do this at scale. And so let me hit on really quickly a little context on both of those directions. So in terms of, I'm going to go reverse. In terms of scale, things like compliance, things like change management, things like indemnification, all of that, right? It's cute to do things at a pilot and to do things when you're a small startup, but at scale, there's lots of risk in this world. So that's going to be one direction. Second direction about being strategic. I'm going to say something very, very, very kind of offensive to some, and I say it intentionally because I love you, not because I think this is really you, but procurement and HR seldom get called strategic. They usually look like a support function, and they're usually stuck and pissed off because they can't be strategic. So the first part of what we're going to talk about is how do you really be strategic around your talent? And we're going to dig really deep into your background within the EOR space and being an executive at People 2.0 and all the experience you've had. Because one of the things, and you know this, I came into this from a tech and a Silicon Valley lens, right? So I didn't get into procurement HR until like 5 years I was into this. And I went, oh, this is not fun, right? This is not that sexy innovation. This
a little
is
clunky.
Right? This is pretty boring, but it's damn important. So could you give us just a snapshot of your own journey, Ange, in terms of, let's go reverse order of myBasePay. How in the world did you get to this place you're at now?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. I like I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Houston, born and bred, native Houstonian. And right out of school, one of my first jobs was at a smaller employer of record organization that actually got their start in 1993, which is when the rise of PEO was really starting to take place in the HR landscape. And I was able to get my first role there. And I transitioned into many different areas: marketing, contract administrator, reviewing contract terms to get into certain programs across different varying levels of organizations. Went into payroll, compliance. There was a lot of financial functions that we were doing. And this organization was primarily servicing the staffing and recruiting agency, which is still a large component of how myBasePay has garnered some of the growth and the attractiveness, the strategic attractiveness that we look to play for that intermediary that is bringing talent out into the market. We were then acquired by People 2.0, and then had the opportunity to go into the business development area. I was probably about 30 years old when I was the VP of North America for the Recruiter Services Support Division. And it was a great organization, and had the opportunity to learn a lot about what the onset of globalization was about to do within the contract labor segment. And then, through that process, had the wonderful opportunity to meet and try to sell to an individual named Cesar Jimenez. If anyone knows him, he's a very tall Puerto Rican man that you can catch at the shows with lots of tattoos. He's going to kill me for that one. But in any event,
not editing that out. That is totally
not editing that one. But no, yeah, we had the opportunity to pitch this story in front of some investors in South Florida by the name of BMI, who have been just a wonderful support group to our growth and the vision, and really believe in what we're trying to do and build. And that was the start of it. We've been able to go into about 300 different programs since then. So there's a lot of systematic processes that you have to take to review contracts, understand the requirements of the contracts. And really, that's what our EOR claim to fame is. The landscape of EOR market players out there is evolving just as quickly as the world of work is around us. So there has been a lot of more platform plays. Anyone that's listening to this has probably heard of Deal, Remote, Multiplier. Those are very one-to-one transactional type of platforms. Our specialization is in contract labor within these programs that have sophisticated procurement processes and enablement for the hiring managers across their organization to tap into resources, be it domestically in the US or across the globe. So that's kind of how I got my start. It's pretty much since I graduated from the University of Houston over 10 years ago or so, and it's been a wild ride since then.
I love it. So I have 3 questions, okay? And they're kind of one question, but there's 3.
Okay.
So we've said this term EOR, right? Mm-hmm. And some of you listeners are going, what the hell is this buzzword or this acronym? And why can't I just go hire the people I want, right? So at a very basic level, that's kind of like one of the overwhelming questions that we're always having to educate and ask. So what I'm going to ask you is, what the hell is EOR? Then, why do we need it? Then, good luck answering this one. Why can't we just do this all ourselves? So, start us off, Ange. What the hell is EOR? Why do we need it? Why can't we just do this ourselves?
What the hell is EOR? EOR is a coined term that is in existence in a world that loves acronyms, right? So just get used to it. It's in the acronym arsenal that you probably want to familiarize yourself for, and it's an employer of record. And an employer of record has been around for many different decades now. It's actually stemming from the 80s, so it's not a new and novel concept. It just happens to be at the height of when globalization, freelancer, and candidates say is really embarking into regular working world and remote working worlds. And I think the second question is, why do you need it, right? Why do organizations want to tap into an employer of record? And the simple answer to that is risk mitigation and compliance oversight. There are a lot of different factors that an organization needs to consider when tapping into talent pools, be it for a long-term or short-term basis. myBasePay specialization has always been on that short-term basis. And as globalization is here, and even domestically speaking, it creates an insulated layer to basically have a party that holds your hand, walks you through the process, makes you understanding of what particular nuances are associated with this geographic location that you're placing workers in, and also offers a layer of insulation so that you can have a party that is tapping into these talent pools with an intermediary that's compliantly overseeing them. And the last question is, why the hell can't we do that ourselves? And it's really down to that. It's the risk. Does your team have the infrastructure, the knowledge, the general counsel backing to go in through these localities and say, you know what, we can administer this process top to bottom without actually leveraging any form of additional exposure onto our party? And if we're thinking about the weighted risk, it's always this incalculable element of human capital. And let's get real here for a second. Human capital is probably the most regulated industry that's out there at a global level. So I think that the opportunity for small to medium-sized businesses to tap into this type of labor market is there, and players like Deal have been able to really let them, almost in a transactional style, go and get your receptionist in the Philippines, get your IT department in India, maybe get a finance and accountant in South America. But when you're dealing with mega conglomerate bureaucratic organizations that have programs that really have a series of requirements that you need to play with, and you're familiar with this working at Microsoft and having been an independent contractor, there's a laundry list of adherences from the systems that you utilize to the compliant oversight. And they're 10 steps ahead of the curve because they know that that's not a route that they can take in directly employing contract labor. There needs to be an intermediary. Oftentimes this has come in the form of a staffing agency, a consulting company, and more recently, an employer of record, or as they've also called it, a payrolling company.
That was perfect. So let me read back to me what really stuck out, and that was the why do we need it question. And you mentioned risk mitigation, compliance oversight, and a big buzzword for all of you enterprise leaders, insulation, right? Yeah. You're enabled to insulate them from getting fired. So now, all good things come in threes. You got 3 more questions coming your way. You ready?
Good. Love it.
Okay. Who cares? And by who, would love for you to tell us who in the org are the ones that need to know about this, are really moving the needle, are the decision makers. So that's the first one. Who cares? The second one is, what if we don't? What if we do nothing? And the third one is going to be, what are my peers doing? So, you ready for the who cares?
Yeah.
Okay.
I could just give you the easy answer of what I think, in my opinion, everyone should care, right? Everyone should care. I mean, you look at any research study that's out there to top level executives, and one of their top 5 concerns is usually acquiring talent that are going to meet the skills that are in demand at the organization that they are overseeing to meet the objectives in the next 5 to 10 year outlook, which is a very real problem that is going to be happening and occurring, is whether or not we're going to have enough talent to meet the demands of certain skills. So there's an anticipated skill shortage. There's an anticipated, ever lurking monster when it comes to, is there going to be enough talent for us to tap into? It's a very competitive marketplace. But the reason why leaders at an organization should care outside of just meeting these objectives is, that there's brand equity at stake, right? There's brand equity at stake when you open up, your Wall Street Journal, your newsletter. I'm an SIA geek, which, by the way, I had a chance to listen to the podcast that you've done with Ursula and Brian, and it's just you open up any of the newsletters, and there is a flurry of misclassification claims, IRS, DOL, government bodies that are really ramping up their investment dollars to run through audits and control this kind of wild west of how work is being reported and then thereby taxed by these individuals. So if any of the executives at the organizations are not considering how are they going to tap into talent to begin with, but also how are they going to retain their brand equity and not be on the news because they were not going through compliant processes, is certainly some of the folks at the organizations that should be involved. But also to that end, the hiring managers, the TA teams, the hiring managers across all of the different departments within an organization. Usually these are the top of mind concerns because they have to deliver on the work that is usually being promised. So that was the first part of the question. The second part of the question was, what happens if we don't do anything about it? And I go back to the point of, there's this incalculable element of risk, right? And I almost feel like I'm garnering this compliance police monster, but at the end of the day, that's not the persona I want to try to eject, because there's usually intermediaries that can help alleviate some of this burden. But it's a very real, I think one of the original, we always look at historical cases of what happened, and Microsoft was part of that. And there was a co-employment claim that came to be when it comes to their external workforce. And, I think we've all come to accept the fact that most organizations and most larger organizations a majority of their workers are external workers. So having this alliance with the partners that you have to oversee these external workers is going to be critically important. It would impede you to think that you can do that yourself as an organization, to tap into the fluctuations, the ebbs and flows, and the kind of the revolving door nature of contract labor. That, having to do that directly, it would be a gross, understatement if I said it's an easy thing to do. So I would say, you don't know what you don't know until you find out, and the brand equity at your organization is at stake throughout that whole entire process. If you don't have the relationship with your partners, your vendors, and the compliance abilities, and ensuring with them that they're doing things the right way with these talent pools. And what was the third question, by the way?
So I'm going to summarize real quick because you did hit a very important point. Yes, which is there's brand equity at stake, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a massively powerful statement, as well as the fact that everyone, right, needs to care about this. And here's one of the analogies that we use, by the way, which is, I'm a technology geek, right? So Silicon Valley, and just wish I could still be a tech company. Our industry is not quite a tech company necessarily, right?
Mm-hmm.
But one of the analogies we always use is we say, hey, what Salesforce did to customer relationship management, whatever you want to call them, talent platforms, freelance models, are doing to work. Now, when you look at the risk of not doing anything, okay, if you didn't adopt cloud computational models or solutions, if you weren't a first mover, that's fine, right? You're using Azure, you're using AWS, there's plenty of solutions for you, right? So it really wasn't that painful if you didn't adopt it at first. Now, if you don't embrace this world of talent, talent's finite. And the best, whatever we want to call them, individuals, workers, employees, leaders, you name it, they only want to work with a select few people, right? They don't want to take on gigs and transactions every single day. They do want to have a select few clients. So if you don't embrace this now, then you're not going to be able to go back to Azure and AWS and say, wow, thanks for this great technology. No, you're cut off, right? And you're not going to be able to compete. So with that lens now, the third question is, what are my peers doing? And just a heads up, I couldn't ask you 4 questions because that breaks the rule, right? But the fourth question would have been, let's tactically sort of go from we're designing to we're piloting to we have a really successful program. But so this third question is, what are my peers doing? And this is where you have visibility to let our listeners know, what are the best brands in the world doing in relation to their talent?
I think without a doubt, at the top of that is that they're enabling a global remote workforce that's going to be compatible and attainable with their hiring managers. That is without a doubt something that we've seen before. And secondarily, I would also say that they're looking to source and identify that talent independently without the help of an intermediary, potentially with the help of a freelancer management system, but they're starting to source and curate their own talent pools independently at a global level so that they can remove the reliance of a third-party intermediary that has traditionally sourced, recruited, and found the right candidates for them. Thirdly, I would say that they're going to put a top layer lens. Of course, it's this reverberating theme that seems to be part of today's episode around compliance, which means that they're probably going to be enhancing the requirements and the audit lens around their partners to ensure that they are upholding compliance at the utmost level. So I just backed it up with 3 different things that I think I'm seeing at the client level with the 3 different questions that you just gave me. Hopefully that helps.
That was like a sucker punch of knowledge, meaning it was so succinct and you nailed it. And it actually, it brings up one of the things that I was debating I would bring up, and I'm going to bring it up. So we learned last week that the staffing industry is predicted to contract by 5%. That's a very bold statement, right? And one of the things you just told me in terms of what you're seeing from the best brands is that they're going direct to talent. They're removing intermediaries. And I'm going to use the term useless intermediaries, meaning they're not actually driving the value of getting the work done or bringing in high-level expertise. But so staffing's going to contract by 5%. Some would say, get out of the world of talent, right? Everything talent related is declining. We know that's not true. The compound annual growth rate of talent platforms is between 12 and 16% globally. So it's not true. But let me just get your take. Staffing's going to go down 5%. And let me actually throw an important caveat too. Your co-founder, Caesar, he runs ProSource IT, right? So he sees the staffing world. So I just want to make sure you listeners know that you're not going into this totally in a vacuum saying EOR, EOR. No. You also have the staffing lens. So let me just throw it over you, Ange. Staffing's going down 5%. What do you think?
Okay. Well, I think I'd have to preface it by saying what has attributed to a lot of the growth that myBasePay has had in the last course of, and by the way, I don't mean to talk about it like it's my baby, but in the last course of 36 months, like I'm counting it, right? Like an infant toddler. But a lot of it has been the staffing intermediary, recruiting agency audience. And I don't necessarily think that it's going to contract. I think that it's going to have to evolve. It's going to have to evolve in the way that they optimize their workforce solutions to complement the directionary evolution that their clients are going to be underseeing. So we always go back to like, what is direct sourcing going to do with staffing agencies? Where do we see the staffing agencies in 10 to 15 years? And I see them evolving just in the very same way that they've had to evolve whenever job boards were posted, whenever the MSP came in, whenever the VMS came in, whenever the freelancer management system comes in. They're going to have to understand that that's a very real option for their clients to have in the marketplace. And now more recently, we talk about AI, automation, what's that's actually going to do internally at an organization to be able to recruit and source their own talent faster and remove that reliance. There's a lot of different distractions, but I've gotten my start within servicing, staffing, and recruiting from the very beginning. And maybe I'm an optimist when I say this, but I do think that it's a resilient industry that will continue to evolve. Now, if there's a staffing agency or recruiting firm that's listening into that, this is not a self-pitch, but there are resources out there like a myBasePay that can allow you to set that precedent in evolving, whether that's you becoming a small to medium-sized business that has traditionally focused on IT talent domestically, now looking to offer services that can complement nearshoring or offshoring, whether or not you become a curation partner for your end client when it comes to some of their direct sourcing initiatives, so that they have additional sourcing and recruiting arm. You're almost consulting them at that point on how to stand up these initiatives internally. There's several different ways that the staffing agency and that whole entire world will have to evolve. Now, when you say 5%, expected decline, I don't really gawk at that, just because if you look at the historical ups and downs of the staffing industry, a lot of the times during presidential elections, during times of economic uncertainty, there have been declines within that market, but there also have been rebounds. They have had a very strong couple of years through the pandemic. And I do think that those that will continue to evolve and understand what their clients are doing and how they can complement that are the ones that will look to sustain the longevity within their organization 10 to 15 years from now.
I have two things to say. And the first is going to be an analogy that I'm writing down just to make sure that I don't forget it. And the first thing, though, is when you mention and this is where I love having your staffing expertise, because when you mention the 5%, you're not saying yes or no. You're saying, well, historically, staffing booms and busts. And you use the example of like president's election or downturns, right? And the analogy that I'm going to use is it's kind of like, see, you wouldn't know because you're in Miami, Houston, but up north, us Northerners, we got about 6 months that our body, we really don't care, but then we have to start prepping, right, to get ready for the summertime. And so it sounds like staffing might be in sort of that prepping phase, that hibernation phase, where if you don't start prepping come beach season, you're going to be the biggest loser on the beach. It seems like that might be it versus in Florida and Houston, where you always need that beach body. But so that's the first thing. Second thing is
Did you write that one down? That was a good one. Did you write down the beach body?
No, that wasn't the one I wrote down. I wasn't too worried about that one. But the second one, though, is that they're one of the analogies that we always use. And, I'll tell you what, it's a lot easier to be in this world today than it was 5 years ago, because 5 years ago, when someone said, hey, if we don't embrace either freelance or independent contractors or digital talent platforms, what's really going to happen? And our answer would be, you're going to have higher attrition. Your true leaders are going to be pissed off and leave, and you're going to be slower and you're going to spend more. But like, that really wasn't a hook, right? The real hook
Mhm.
is, well, you're going to become Blockbuster. And one of the analogies that I love in looking at staffing is when you look at the movie industry, okay, Blockbuster went bye-bye. Movie studios stayed and had to evolve. And so you said, the quote you said was, it's not necessarily that they're going to go away or contract, but rather they have to evolve. And my brain goes to, well, if we look at the evolution of streaming, Blockbuster, bye-bye, movie studios, they had to adjust. When we look at the world of staffing and we look at the world of external talent, is there any solutions that you go, yes, that's just going to go bye-bye and others have to evolve? Because I'm kind of thinking very selfishly as the leader who has budget right now and has to make a serious decision. Is there
Mhm.
technologies that you should be looking at sunsetting, or partners or vendors that you should be looking at sunsetting? But so yeah, there's my crazy analogy for you. And I think what I'm really asking is there any just totally waste of space solutions that are not going to exist as globalization, digitization, the freelance workforce, grows?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know that you guys talk about it in a lot of the different episodes, but there has to be a very acute awareness of what AI is going to do in the industry that you service, right? And what does that mean? Going back to the staffing agency, what does that mean to the staffing agency that services maybe certain roles or types at a high volume that could potentially be replaced because organizations are going to learn to build those internal talent pool strategies themselves, potentially complemented by some AI or automation tools. I would also really look at, what is it going to be that sets myself apart, and it is understanding. I go back to, I think Caesar sent this to me the other day, but there was an article out there that says like anyone could code now with AI, right? So really, what is that going to do to the development workforces that are out there, that are sophisticated and have built talent pools all across the globe when, Copilot just came out with an enhancement that you can do Python and Excel now. Like these are incredible, like leaps and bounds that the tech space is playing, and how is that going to like actually transcend itself into the everyday transaction of a job order and a job to fill. That for sure, without a doubt, is something that I think would be a top of mind concern as a business owner, but more so as a business owner that's attuned to getting talent through the door for their clients. There are certain things that I would say also could potentially not exist in the years to come. I think it was super interesting. I don't know if you saw this, Matt, but Klarna came out with something a couple of weeks ago where they say that they are replacing their CRM system, which is Salesforce, and their HRIS system, which is Workday, with their own language learning tools and AI embedded in through the everyday grain. Now, there's been a lot of criticism for that because it's like, Klarna, you're a finance, afterpay platform. Why the hell are you working on building an HRIS system? Because it's attainable to them. So can we see, and they're also pioneering into what it could be a very real reality for many different organizations in a 5 to 10 year outlook on what are they building internally. So could we see instances like that take place? Absolutely. But I think more than anything, I don't think that these tools that we're utilizing are going to be extinct. I think the ones that actually give us the enablement through tapping in through various learning languages and AI are the ones that are going to, again, the continual evolvement that we'll look to see and how that plays out into the worker landscape.
I love it. So I have a crazy statement to make, Ange, and for you listeners, listen extra hard and take notes on this. So one of the things that I get so pissed off about when going to a bunch of different conferences and then even seeing like internal events is usually the speakers, they just tell a bunch of stories, and like 90% of them are totally made up or like very, very much exaggerated. And I'm going to recommend for you listeners out there, invite Ange to go speak at least 4 times a year or to your executive teams, because part of what we've just talked about is exactly what every single executive team, whether it's the CEO or the CHRO, needs to be aware of. And specifically what you just said last, which is look out for high volume recs or high volume areas. I mean, bam, that is okay, you're helping these leaders go where the puck is going rather than just talking about the past 30 years where 15 years ago you did something that was like kind of special, but not really. So I just want to make sure I call it out, Ange, and you listeners, please write this down. So now you have 2 directions and you get a pick. You can pick both or you can pick one, you name it. But one direction is going to be big wins where you highlight some of the companies, and you don't have to say them by name. You can totally obfuscate. One other thing about our industry, as you know, is most people can't talk publicly, and that's totally okay. So you can obfuscate. So big wins. Second direction, though, is some of the regional trends. And so we've been hearing in the last 3 months, and we don't see it slowing down, nearshoring and LATAM. You actually know. You were literally you were in Honduras last week, right? Or 2 weeks ago. So you actually know what the F you're talking about, where most of us don't. But so you have 2 directions to go. You can either talk about the regional trends and implications or the big wins from you and your clients. You take your pick, Ange.
Okay. I think I'm going to go with both, right? I'm going to give you a use case from a client that we were able to help service with a LATAM complement to it. So LATAM, well, I mean, obviously there's a personal connotation. I'm teaching you guys how to say empanadas from the very beginning of this podcast for a reason, right? We're a minority-owned company, 100% Latino-based. I think that we are the only Latino-based EOR company out there. You know what? I could be wrong on that. I'll take that back. But that's exclusively focused on EOR, right? We're not a staffing agency that's complemented by EOR. But why it's been at these resurgences, like really, if we think about what outsourcing and offshoring has been historically, obviously there's reasons like cost savings and enablement and delivery times that have really created, what we see in APAC for the last 30 years. It's, these, Bangalore, the Philippines, Ukraine, these are markets that have done the offshoring model and they have done it well. Now, why nearshoring has really come to play, in my personal and humble opinion, is a couple of different reasons. Number one, there's definitely a cultural affinity, right? We're dealing with a market that not only is close to the US, but to the US consumer is very similar and very culturally aware of how to work with US counterparts. Number two, it's the English level. I know that there's a lot of socioeconomic disturbances that have occurred in LATAM, and honestly, since the existence of a lot of Latin American countries forming as a republic or independent republics. But there also has been a great monetary and governmental imperative that has really created this younger, flourishing generation of fluent and English speaking speakers. And it's like the running joke with Caesar is sometimes the people speak better in LATAM than they do in South Florida, right? Like it's wonderful to see how English has been adopted. A lot of the time you're dealing with talent pools that have studied English from the time that they were in grade school, like pre-kinder type of level. The third thing, obviously, as we know, which has really been the precipice of offshoring to begin with, is the cost savings. And then I would just say the fourth is the degree of talent. So these are all, uniquenesses that are tied to what's happening within the Latin American areas. And we actually had an opportunity with a large healthcare organization to literally outsource their entire departments into different Latin American countries, predominantly Costa Rica, Colombia, some parts of Brazil. We have also been able to diversify our own footing within these areas. We can go in through, I could probably have another podcast of like top things to know about what's different in Latin America when you're, working through the compliance aspect of it. But the enablement that this organization was able to have was agility, right? They were able to ramp up and ramp down. It was a project where they were developing an app. We were able to supply 160 developers within Bogota and Medellin. And it's been definitely a use case that we have documented in terms of the savings, not just the savings though, because savings is one thing, it's the delivery and the level of delivery that these folks were able to produce in. So we really see that as the natural evolvement of our pipeline and where we ended up going when we started this organization. We sure as hell didn't think that we were going to be experts in EOR in Latin America, but we had to withstand and see where the direction of the market was and be able to respond to it. And that was one of the examples that we have with a larger healthcare institution in South Florida.
Let me ask, I think, a quick question, and that's going to be, what would we say some of the top 5 ahas in terms of differences between LATAM and the US? And we could use a lens of compliance here you want. We could use a lens of culture or just working norms. But I'll give you from the outside the US looking in perspective, meaning, some examples of this. And so when talking with especially European-based either platforms or customers trying to break into the US, one of the big ahas is usually that the US is actually numerous different countries inside one, right? So that's always an aha. A second one is that culturally, the US might have some similarities in terms of most Americans are a lot more, I'd say, open and warm than most places. Obviously regionally. But if you look at, someone in San Francisco versus someone in Boston, you're going to see some really, really big differences, right? So I wonder, like a crash course in Latin America compared to the US and even compared to Europe, what are some of the big ahas that we can expect?
Yeah. And I'm going to speak to my US counterparts on this is like, if you guys are thinking about going global, understand that the US is the strongest, probably employer-centric market out there with the utmost protections, generally speaking, across employers. Now, there are certain states, like you mentioned, that do have a little bit more rigorous employee-centric protections. But for the most part, the moment that you step off and go global, you're going to be dealing, likely the case, with some very employee-centric government bodies with a lot more protections and a lot more oversight for the workers that they are over, that they're overseeing. So one of the things that, I thought was fascinating, and this is somebody that grew up as a Latina, I didn't know any of this stuff really like 10 years ago, but there's a lot more protections over these workers. There's a lot more holidays. There's a lot more severances. There's a lot more, I guess you could say, obstacles to learn to jump through when you are dealing with Latin American talent pools. Outside of that, one of the other considerations is how do you build that into a profitable model so that you're not getting surprised, down the line when you have a severance payout because this person lasted longer than a year, or bonus months because workers have 13th and 14th bonus payouts. So really relying on a partner that's going to be able to make you understand these are the obligations that we have to adhere to. This is how you make it profitable for your organization to tap into with these considerations baked into the overall rate that you need to extend out into the market or take into consideration under this project or SAO. So that's definitely layer number one. From a cultural lens, I think that what's been super fascinating to me, at least to be able to witness, is just the level of loyalty and talent retainment that has just been outstanding for us to be able to see. It really is one thing to be able to offer competitive benefits, but it's another thing to be able to offer competitive benefits that impact generational change on the individual that is very much aware of perhaps the circumstances that they're held within in probably a third world country or a more disadvantaged country. So all of those tendencies actually equate to a more loyal, a more retentive, and a more productive program, which has out the gate really surpassed. And I think that would probably be one alarming difference for us to consider when we're talking about EMEA and LATAM from a cultural lens and cultural perspective. The tenacity of these folks to get things done is probably contributed to the fact that they have competitive wages in a landscape where getting a job is not a very easy thing to do. Getting a job that is stable is not a very easy thing to be able to maintain.
I hadn't thought about that before. To be honest, the loyalty component of you're able to impact generational change, and that's really big, right? That's really really powerful, and especially, I have a friend who actually works at the same company that his dad worked at, and he's the only one I know that has generational loyalty. But when you do it, man, some of the things that he's told me in terms of that he's stuck with, I'm like, why in the world would you do that? And it's because they've been so good generationally. So that is incredible. Now let's hit on in this cultural side. What are some of, because you mentioned the challenges from a compliance perspective and an employment law perspective, but culturally. And I think this might actually be kind of fun. I'll give you as someone that lived in South Florida for a little bit, right? That lived in Miami for a little bit. Boy, did I have some cultural shocks. And one
Yeah.
of those, right? And I'll give you a couple, and then you can be like, well, F you, right? And that's true everywhere. But so first shock, and this was actually when I was in grad school, is it can be disrespectful to be on time, right? So I remember one time, we had a where was he from? I forget, but
If I
basically he was
ever invite you
always
anywhere, I need you 90 minutes late. Okay, please.
yeah. Listen, he was always 10 minutes late. So we're talking like group projects and stuff. And at first we finally snapped on him and we're like, I forget his name. We're like, dude, why are you keep doing this? And he turned to us and he's like, wait, what am I doing? And we're like, so you're not being an a-hole. And he was like, well, it's disrespect. So that was one big shock, right? A
That's
second,
funny.
yeah. So I'm gonna give it over to you, and you tell us what are some of those like cultural shocks that can be challenges, but literally once you have the conversation, it's over and it's no longer a challenge.
Yeah. Well, and I would say the timeliness hasn't been a factor, although culturally that's very real. And what you just mentioned is absolutely without a doubt the truth. But what I would say is that, adapting to global workforces, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is that Americans are truly workaholics. This is hustle culture 24/7. And you're dealing with talent pools that put the time away at 5, right? They're going to walk away. They're not going to stay until 5:45, 6:45. And I think that is something from the lens of an American that always wants to get stuff done and that will take the emails at night while it's changing a baby's diaper. That has happened before, full disclosure. I mean, I feel like there is much more of an acceptance of this work-life balance, and they know when to stop, right? They absolutely know when to stop. And I don't necessarily know if that's a disadvantage, but it definitely is a reality in knowing that, the burning till the midnight oil is not very, proclaimed in these areas of the world.
Yeah. No, that is I would put that as it does not have to be an issue if it is known, which shows the importance of having a good partner, right? And shows the
Yeah.
importance of not going in eyes closed, but rather having a partner who can talk the talk with you and translate. I mean,
Yeah,
it's no different than if you're not technical trying to build anything technical, right?
for
So,
sure.
all right, last direction, last theme, and that is actually getting started. So, for the leader out there who now they really understand that this is not just them, right? They're going to have to pull their CEO in, or if it's the CEO, they understand they need to have a better relationship with their talent leaders. Some of the things we've talked about is globalization, crucial,
Mhm.
insulation, crucial, right? We can't do this 100% ourselves. We've also hit on getting rid of the intermediary layers, and you use the term staffing evolution, right? Rather than just contraction. Now, I want to give you the stage to talk exactly to that leader in terms of what does their first 30, 60, 90 days look like? Should they just ditch their partner and go talk to you? Should they put a working team? Like, what have you seen as the best 30, 60, 90-day plan for embracing the future workforce?
Yeah, I think that the precipice of all of this is really understanding the role that external talent is going to play in achieving the results that you need to see. And it really is the foundation of what has led to this popularity at like Human Cloud, right? You guys have specialized within the freelancer segment, the contract worker segment, the contingent workforce segment. There is without a doubt a precedence that needs to be established in knowing that the directional change of the future of work, or whatever it is that you want to call it, is set at the foundation of external and non-direct talent. And it's not just because of globalization or remote work, it's also because it's becoming a glaring preference for the actual candidate themselves, right? This is the direction that the world is evolving into, and this is the direction that the candidates actually like and favor. And I think that we are going to be living in a world where people have multiple side hustles, they tap into multiple income streams, and they're able to do so at the onset of technology. So I would really know that, hey, what am I doing to complement the objectives my organization can achieve through the usage of external talent? The second layer I would look at, and not to be the compliance piece again, but what are some of those layers or intermediaries that I can rely on that would actually help me execute this plan? The third stack is looking at your operational and tech stacks, right? What is that lifecycle management actually going to contain when it comes to the onboarding and the experience of that worker from the time that we say you got the offer to the time that they got their last paycheck? How does that tech stack really live through the experience of each worker? And then the fourth area that I would really consider is, what is that global cultural alignment that we're going to be looking to maintain to make sure that we can retain and continue to attract the workers through our system? Those are the four areas that I think are at absolute, top of mind. How do you get there within 30 to 60 to 90 days? Depends on how quickly your organization can look at all of these objectives and make real-time decision. I will say the bigger the organization, the longer the timeline. We all know that. If you're looking at it from that layer, now from my own like soapbox, I think what really drives me behind all of this is knowing, what economic opportunities does freelancer provide to the global workforce in areas that once didn't or couldn't attain these forms and streams of income? So that's going to be the most exciting thing to see, in my own opinion, is, how do these local talent pools actually directly contribute to the economic increases within these local areas, and really what that lends to a work-life balance that is gratifying for these folks is what I'm most excited about. So anyways, hopefully that answers your question, or at least gives you a little bit of a roadmap.
That was perfect. I have two more questions that are the most important questions by far. So listeners, here's the context for you. So you're going to go reach out to Ange after this, and hopefully you already have. What I want you to, in your email, to put is, I want you to put exactly these two questions that I'm going to ask you, specifically your answer, Ange. So the first question is, what is your favorite type of, and make sure I say it right, empanada?
Empanada. Well, I'm not really a sweet girl. I'm more of a savory. So I would say empanadas de pollo. Chicken empanadas.
And I was hoping all of me, I'm not going to lie, on the back of my head, I was like, say pollo, say carne. Okay.
But I will say, though, in Honduras, they have these things called pastelitos, which are called little cakes. And they're like an empanada, but it's the exact same thing. But they're just called pastelitos, and they are with ground beef and rice, equally as good.
Okay. So
clearly I'm a carnivore.
Second question. Well, there's a cultural, right? So good luck going to Latin Americans saying, hey, do you have a vegan menu? Second thing, what is your favorite dish?
Oh,
you only have one, unfortunately.
For me, man, that's so hard. I have to answer with two.
Fine.
Okay, so it's another chicken dish. It's called pollo guisado, and it's just like this, like kind of like stewed, soupy chicken with rice and beans and like fresh farmer's cheese, avocado, and handmade tortillas. Fire, and it's that dish that like gets you to like nostalgia land, right? That's my mom's favorite dish, and I've just become a second like prototype of that woman. That's dish number one. Dish number two actually lends to my American roots, I guess you could say, even though it's Italian, but definitely any form of pasta, sign me up. I'm there. I'm your girl.
Listen, Ange, this was incredible. Most important question is, where can our listeners find you and myBasePay?
Hey, yeah, this was so much fun. Thank you for having me on the show. You're awesome, Matt. I'm on LinkedIn, Angela Alberty, Albert with a Y at the end is the easy way to tell folks. Or you can just hit me an email, angela@mybasepay.com. Happy to help answer any questions or just chop it up over contingent talent. We can geek out all together.
With those dishes and no vegetables. All right, Ange, thank you so much for hopping on.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Thanks, guys.